Hey everybody, it's me, Andrew Markowitz again. Um, again, I apologize for these mic issues, but there's really not much I can do about it right now. Money is just way too tight. Um, I'm, yeah, money is just way too tight, and my schedule is just gonna get tighter to try and solve that issue. Unfortunately, which is why there was no video yesterday. Um, I had work. I had immediately after work time with family, and then I had a friend who I was worried about, and I finally got a chance to talk to, and I got to be able to talk with him and his wife, and talk with them about a couple of things. And then before work, there was just too much stuff going on as well, because between trying to get some reading done and also trying to add more to my workload, I just couldn't find the time to get a video done yesterday. And yeah, that aside, Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad, has come out with a new video, My Fall from Liberalism, and I really want to react to it.
So a chap
So let's get into that.
called Mike Burke tweeted this article at me because in it he references what he calls my fall from liberalism. And because of the murder of Charlie Kirk, everyone is living in this kind of new world after such a terrible event. But my view on
Agreed.
liberalism wasn't informed by the murder of Charlie Kirk, and I'd come to this decision long before. Now,
Yeah.
it spends quite a lot of time in the article describing what has happened, which is all fine, I agree, that these are the things that did happen. And then he gets to Matt Walsh. How Matt Walsh is quite a quite strong conservative, and very much, of course, a hardline critic of the left, and someone who himself would not be considered a liberal.
I would agree to that.
And so
No.
you've got Matt Walsh, and then the article kind of bleeds in to the post-liberals, such as people like Yoram Hazony and Patrick Denis,
I don't know those names.
to speak with the voice of theory, as he says. And I've read Why Liberalism Failed, I've read a few other post-liberal works, and I definitely would consider myself in that space. And
I'll give you my hot take on why liberalism failed. Liberalism thought they could solve ah, goodness. Ah. Sorry guys, I'm getting a bit sick. Liberalism failed because of the fact that you took God out of the equation. And as it turns out, when Jesus Christ leaves the door, walks out the door, there's a bunch of issues that human beings really suck at solving without us having a higher authority telling us, yes, do things this way because I said so, and I am the real arbiter of life. I am the arbiter of justice. Ugh. Sorry guys, I got like a frog in my throat.
these have got nothing to do with Charlie Kirk either, because, as he puts in the article, the terms are calm and the words respectable, but the conclusion is revolutionary. The liberal order itself is hollow, irredeemable, and must be replaced.
I fully agree. It is hollow. It is a hollow worldview because it tried to take all of the ideas and things of Christianity, throw God out the window, and say we can hold to these values on our own as man. That's like literally the first fall. That if you read Genesis, that's literally basically what we did in the fall when we ate the apple. Like, What did we expect to happen? It to go well? Of course it didn't go well. Of course it fell apart.
And that's correct. That's just correct. That is the proper way to approach the problems that we are facing at the moment. Because it is liberalism that brought us to this point. If you consider, say, sort of Reaganite, Buckleyite conservatism, that is also liberalism.
Yeah.
It is just liberalism that is going the speed limit. Whereas you can consider any kind of centre-left, progressive, to quite radical, I mean genuinely, like communism, is a variant of liberalism. And this springs forth from liberal premises and principles. And all of that is a variant or a descendant of liberalism. And this has brought us to this place.
Agreed.
This view, this worldview, the philosophy, the ideology, it is all responsible for
the Enlightenment, this aspect, I should say, of the Enlightenment, because there's parts of the Enlightenment that were actually good. This part of the Enlightenment failed utterly and completely. I will be back in one moment. I gotta grab something.
State of the world now. And it can only drive us in one direction.
Yep.
And there is nowhere else to go with liberalism itself. Now, I'll probably write a book on this, to be honest. This is the sort of thing I was covering in my master's degree and my philosophy degree. This is the telos of liberalism, to push us continually to this place. And whether you've got what we can call conservatives, who are liberals and are interested in getting to the place that the most radical left wing.
The problem is that liberalism intrinsically, ironically enough, because it refuses God, attracts socialism, which is the antithesis to Christianity and Christian values, and in doing so, erodes and destroys society. It just doesn't work. You can't build something on a moral Christian foundation and not understand that Christian foundation, and then not understand that Christian foundation, and then two, completely reject the core aspect of that foundation and think you can do it without the core aspect of that foundation. It's just not going to work. It's like taking out the main pillar in a house. The whole thing's going to fall apart.
Trying to get to, but only as long as it doesn't collapse in on itself. So you can call those the sensible liberals, compared to the radical liberals, who are just mental and are doing it out of spite, basically.
Yep.
All of these people have the same goal in mind, and I don't agree with the goal. I don't agree with what they're trying to achieve, and so I
don't agree with it either.
I wasn't just not a liberal, but I was very much against liberalism. Because actually, what liberalism is promising is basically evil. It's basically the dissolution of all of society, all of the bonds between men and place. And I'm sorry, I'm just very much...
It is. Liberalism is a subtle, antagonistic, anti-deity ideology. It seeks freedom to the truest extent, and it thinks that freedom comes from freedom from everything, including God. That is one of the logical conclusions and steps that is taken in liberalism. Gonna be real with you, no society in the modern era has succeeded without God. This has been the bloodiest century in human history, without a doubt. And it's not even close. Fully agree. Liberalism, socialism, communism all lead in the same direction. And they will all end in the same result: destruction. They're not good ideologies. They're actually intrinsically, when you think about them, all extremist ideologies in their truest forms and aspects, and then the realities, because of the fact that they try to reject core aspects of humanity, and core necessary things to maintain a society. Uh, and in doing so, will lead to a society's destruction.
Against that, it's the death of all nations. It's the death of all social structures. It's the flattening of all moral hierarchies into an endless, boundless horizon of...
Nate DeSala on Wise Disciple puts it really, really, really well. It's a problem that a lot of people do when they are looking at the Bible, is they try to flatten everything out when everything is mountains and valleys, or as I like to put it, there's the surface level of the pond, and then there's the depths of the ocean. The Bible touches both, and you gotta look at them together.
Equality, and I'm not for it. I'm not for that.
Though honestly, I think my surface of the pond one really more attributes to looking at the problems of society, rather than looking at how the Bible is done. I think the peaks and valley, the mountains and valleys equation more attributes to the Bible, and the moral framework, structures, and problems that we have more attributes to the surface of the pond and the depths of the ocean.
I'm for the distinctions between peoples, between times, between morals, between groups. I'm for distinctions.
Yeah.
And dare I say,
agreed.
I'm for diversity. I am for...
Well, how can you be diverse if everybody is the same? If everybody is a blank slate, if everybody is that thing and no one's distinct, this is why it's so important to understand what the image of God is, and that the image of God isn't diversity or anything like that. It's not that God isn't diverse or isn't capable of many things and is able to display himself in any form he chooses, which is why we all look and are all different in the way that we are different. It's the fact that you know what? I'll actually save the image of God for another video, because there's like 2, maybe 3 videos that I'm going to try to get out in the next 2 days on stuff. So I'm going to actually hold my tongue there on that. We'll get into that in another one, because the image of God is going to be better discussed in another video than this one. And I'll be able to go much more in depth on it.
These things. And it's because liberalism not only doesn't understand the value of these things, but actively treats things outside of its own purview as hostile, because it's created for itself an entirely new way of looking at morality. But I have actually come to the conclusion that it's not moral at all. It's actually a kind of negation of morality.
Yeah.
It's not even evil, actually, I should say. It's something else, and that something else is kind of terrifying. Because you've got to remember, with morality is a fundamentally social endeavor.
No. I disagree with him here. It is evil. Because a rejection of morality, a dissipation, a flattening, and a complete throwing out of morality is evil, because morality is good, and good is God. And as I have stated in previous videos, if something lacks good, it lacks God, and if it lacks God, it is evil. That is the binary. There is actually a binary there. Either it has the substance of God, or it lacks the substance of God. One cannot have both.
Ever. Morality happens between...
It is merely the level of evil, the quantity, the volume, or the quality of evil present that really dictates how we should handle a situation, and then thus act out the good, create the good that can come out of this evil, this problem that has arisen, this chaos, this wickedness, whatever you want to describe it as. This rejection of God, this absence of God, that is actually how it happens. That's how God's will gets moved in through us, and we act out as Christians to do those things. Um, that is the good deed being present in front of evil, um, and in spite of evil.
In people. Therefore, morality itself happens in relationships. The relation, you've got a person and another person, and then that thing connecting them, the metaphysical
Agreed.
bond between them.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. I would fully agree with that. But it's important to have your morality in a structure and a framework, and the highest tether of that morality needs to be God. Because if it's just among men, men suck as judges.
Is a relationship, and that's where morality exists. The liberal, however, doesn't agree with that. They don't believe morality exists in the relations between people. They believe in categorical morality. In fact, Kant calls it the categorical imperative, and they expect that any rational being should be able to sign up to a series of maxims that can operate as universal rules, and following these rules makes you moral. Well, I don't agree with that at all. I mean,
I don't agree with it either, probably for different reasons than Carl. Because I don't believe Christianity is giving you a rule book that you have to follow and everything in it. I believe that Christianity is giving you one rule, and that rule is God and Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and then everything else in your morality will naturally follow by believing in that and truly believing in that. So I don't believe in a rule set or that kind of thing, and I don't even believe that that's really a maxim. I believe that's the truth. The core depths, the very bottom, the Marianas Trench of the ocean is Christ. That is the truth that lies at the bottom of it. That is where all of our problems start and end, is either separating ourselves from Christ or joining ourselves to Christ. I think that's where everything starts and ends as a Christian. And I think that's one of the most fundamental aspects you need to build your foundation on as a Christian. Is that aspect of, am I separating myself here from Christ in this manner, or am I not? And that is a way to live life.
Categorical thinking is specifically non-relational. Anyone in the category, even if they're not related to each other, never met each other, don't live on the same continent, they're still in the same category, and therefore categorical thought groups these people together inappropriately, whereas relational thought looks at what is actually connected, what is actually together, and these relations and the character of them, the morality expressed in them, is either good or evil. It is either going in a virtuous direction or going in a vicious direction.
It's either going.
That, I think, is
that's basically what I just said. So I actually kind of agree with him here. It's either going towards God or it's going away from God. Those are your two options.
Actually, morality, because that requires affirmative actions. As in, it is not enough to simply not break the rules. Do not steal, because I could will that not stealing should be a universal maxim. Is useful enough as
I agree.
Law,
it's useful
but it's
as a
not
law,
any good,
but it's not actually good to hold
describe
people to.
A person who has never wrung their ground.
It's not actually holding someone to a moral consequence. It's not actually building a relational tether that holds people down. I get what he means.
Or a person who every Sunday goes over to a house and bakes her a Sunday roast. These are not moral equivalents. These people are not morally equivalent. One of them is deeply selfish and should pick up the phone and phone their nan, and the other is someone who does good for others and therefore is more morally worthy than the other. Literally that.
Yeah, moral worth is a thing. Again, I personally believe, Romans 3:10 through 18. No one is truly good. No one is good at all. No one is righteous. No one is worthy. no one is worthy of heaven. I forget what, I think it's Isaiah. Isaiah also goes into it and describes how our deeds are filthy rags before God, and that makes sense because God is all good. God is even the good you do. So of course your good would be worthless in front of God, and this is why we need Christ. Because we would, after sinning and after the fall, we would never be able to connect back with God. We would never be able to. If God had to enact true justice as He should, as the morally good arbiter, there was no way a single one of us would step foot through the gates of heaven.
Simple. Morality is positive. It is not negative, as liberalism would have it.
Agreed.
And so I do think this attitude is irredeemable, hollow, and has to be replaced. It is what is actually, as he says, hollowing out our civilization. This
Agreed. It's a flattening, a panning out of trying to make everything so simplistic and surface level.
Any other. No person has any connection to any other, at least one that wasn't expressly chosen. And this is where the social contract comes into it. You don't even have intrinsic ties to your own civilization now, theoretically.
And that doesn't make any sense.
Something that we can agree to or disagree to and change at a whim. Now, obviously, that's not true, and it doesn't work that way. Again, yet another fallacy of liberalism. But the problem with all of this is that it does create this kind of mysticism that acts as a new religion, and I'll show you.
He's not wrong. Thinking about what I learned about social contract theory and everything else in high school and stuff like that, yeah, he's not wrong. It's saying that, especially schools taking God out of the equation in the way that they have, and how deeply involved God was in our founding as a country and the founding of many of these countries that believed in liberalism, like, yeah, he's not wrong.
How it is described as a kind of religion as we go through this article. Now, I just want to be clear, I don't know this chap, and he's not mean to me or anything like that. And so I don't want to come across like I'm against him personally. I just really strongly disagree with the way in which this is characterized. So it comes to me.
The consequence, I'm going to read this before he does. The consequence can already be seen in Britain. Carl Benjamin, once cited as a liberal critic of extremism, rose to prominence online as Sargon of Akkad, defending ordinary values against both the woke left and the alt-right. For a time, he proved that one could resist without succumbing to it. His anger was not misplaced. He saw clearly the cowardice of those who excused Islamist intolerance in the name of multiculturalism, and his indignation was a natural response of a man who loved his country and feared for its moral spine. But in time, his indignation lost shape. Righteous fury that once sought to defend liberal order hardened into rage against the order itself. Well, that's because the order is corrupt. The order has actually lost its core foundation, its core aspect that built liberalism. Liberalism was built off of the foundational principles of Christianity. That's one of the big things. So many of the documents, including the Magna Carta and things like that, reference God, reference certain things in the Bible and stuff like that. Like, there is heavy biblical reference in so many of these things. And throwing that aside and throwing that out, you are throwing out the source. You are throwing out the depths. And that's going to be a problem, okay? It just is. And if you don't think that it is, you're a fool. You're looking at the surface of the pond, fishing at the surface, and not looking at what lurks in the deep. And that's going to get you screwed up. I'll let him finish the rest of it.
He says, can be seen in Britain. Carl Benjamin, once a liberal critic of extremism, rose to prominence online as Sargon of Akkad, defending ordinary values against both the woke left and the alt-right. For a time, he proved that one could resist excess without succumbing to it. His anger was not misplaced. He saw clearly the cowardice of those who excused Islamist intolerance in the name of multiculturalism. His indignation was the natural response of a man who loved his country and feared for its moral spine. But in time, his indignation lost its shape. The righteous fury that once sought to defend the liberal order hardened into a rage against the order itself. The problem with the woke left isn't the woke part, it's the left part, he declared. A phrase that revealed not opposition to fanaticism but rejection of liberal democracy itself. From there, his anger became identity, resentment supplanted liberty. The other was no longer merely the zealots who refused to integrate, but anyone who did not fit into a narrowing vision of Englishness. So Benjamin claimed that the flag belonged only to those of English blood, and therefore Jews could never truly be English.
That's not true. That's not what he said. That's not what he's claimed to say. I've watched Sargon for a long time. That's not his mentality.
All is a tragedy.
Why do they always bring up the Jews, bro? They always throw the Jews at somebody, bro. It's a hilarious. Either they're throwing stuff at the Jews or they're throwing the Jews at you. It's so funny. It really is. It's pure irony, especially if you're a Christian and you have any understanding of this stuff to any degree. It is absolutely hilarious.
The loss of a steward who once held the line against extremism only to join the ranks of those he opposed. His descent into a possible portent for a terrible turn on the his descent is a possible portent for a terrible turn on the American right. His journey shows how righteous anger can curdle into amorphous rage, when love of home turns into hatred of neighbour, when cultural inheritance is mistaken for ethnic possession, and when a people forgets that the truest test of belonging lies not in ancestry but in allegiance. If Benjamin could fall, any of us could.
You should have allegiance to your nation. You should have allegiance to your country. You should. You should. Like, that's not a bad thing to have, is allegiance, patriotism, or a feeling of national belonging and national responsibility towards the nation whose land you grew up in and were born in. This is why I actually get upset with how we've acted and dealt with the problems on our southern border, is we have let the evil fester down there. And we've just let it fester, and we've told them, give up on your countries and run here. That's wrong. That's evil. That's bad. No, we should tell them, have the strength and spirit of man, have the strength and will of God to go fight the evil that is condemning and corrupting your nation. Here, let us come help you do this. Let us condemn and quell the evil together. That's what we should be doing. We shouldn't tell them, give up on your homeland, give up on the place that you were born in. No. Not at all. That's evil. Okay? That's evil. I want them to have their homeland. I don't want them to have to make my homeland their homeland. I want them to have their homeland, the place they were born in. I want their homeland to prosper, not just mine. I don't want them to have to come here to prosper. I think that's wrong. I think they should prosper and be prosperous where they were born and lived in most of their life. That's what I think. And if I'm evil for thinking that, I don't know what to tell you.
America abandons its inheritance, it could fall further still. Right, so let's just dissect this, shall we? Because I don't agree with a lot of the characterization in here.
I don't agree either, Carl, watching you for so long.
Done from a position of ill will, it's done from a position of liberal mysticism. Believing oneself as essentially the spiritual and moral elect, which frankly, liberals just...
This is why my favorite question to ask atheists, my favorite question to ask leftists, and my favorite question to ask anybody on a lot of the sides of the aisle like this is, who made you the arbiter of life? Who made you the true judge of good and evil? Where and when was this done? That's my question for them. Because to me, there's only one judge who fits that description. His name is Jesus Christ. He sits at the right hand of the Father. Okay? That's that judge for me. I know he's the judge for me, and I know he's the judge for everyone else. I put myself beneath him, and I worship and praise him, and I follow his line and guidance because he is greater than me and he knows more than me. Liberalism presumes, as he just said,
aren't. And in many ways, this conceit is the cover for those people on the radical left in particular.
I'm going to let him speak for a hot minute.
Tell
here.
themselves that they're being good people while they're hurting others. This is what allows them to do it. To say, actually, if I have my suite of categorical imperatives, and I've been told by Immanuel Kant that the only truly good person, the only truly good thing is a good will, then if I just hold a good will, I can do whatever I want. My non-action of believing something, which I could just believe something different tomorrow, was it C.S. Lewis? I believe 20 impossible things before breakfast or something. You can believe anything you want, just flitting. I'm going to believe now in Allah, I'm going to believe now in God, I'm going to believe now in Woden. You know, like, you could believe whatever you want. You could just choose and decide and come to the conclusion that at any point, it is your actions that are actually your morality. That's what's really moral.
So
actually.
True. So true.
I mean, having good intentions is nice, but it is not sufficient to call yourself a good person. And like I said, it provides cover for those people who just say, oh yeah, no, bro, I definitely have the best intentions. Now let's go and do something horrible to that evil, fascist, racist, Nazi,
yep.
blah, 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 blah.
You get to define what is good and evil. You get to
how this
do some
provides
pretty
cover for it.
horrible shit.
In that in and of itself, I really strongly object, right?
Agreed.
But anyway, so he proved that one could resist excess without succumbing to it. I'm not in any way demonstrating an excess of liberalism, right? I am demonstrating a massive deficit of liberalism because I'm just against it. I'm just completely opposed to it. I'm not in favour of being.
I've watched him for a long time. I would say that that's right. Where his position has shifted
the
over
moderate
time.
Liberal is the person who looks at the status quo that got us to this point, that has allowed our countries to become so
Nick Friedis has a whole series
scarred
on this and goes really good on it.
Through the liberal experiment, that they say, well, I mean, you know, this is just normalcy. This is the baseline of what a normal civilization is. Bringing in millions of people, having hate speech codes, having all these sorts of welfare dependencies, having the government.
Apparently turning your entire country into 1984 or any one of George Orwell's or A Brave New World or so many of those works of George Orwell is perfectly normal.
Government increase until it essentially becomes totalitarian. Like, this is all normal to the liberal. This is the way that the world ought to be, because the liberal, like I described earlier, can't actually define a good or bad person. All it can define is a person who has or has not broken the rules. And actually, the rules are often a lot.
It's just like I said. It removed the core and it tried to handle everything at the surface.
Long way off. They're often far above us, and actually don't inform what is actually on the ground, where we are, what a good or bad person is.
Yes.
And so liberalism can't teach people to be virtuous. In fact, liberalism would be perfectly at home with a civilization of devils, as long as the devils followed the rules.
Yep.
That would be fine for liberalism.
They would be, if you're looking at a D&D chart, they would be fine with lawful evil. They would be fine with that.
So if everyone around was working against one another, seeking to undermine their businesses, seeking
that
to
would be
get one over on each
demons,
person,
not devils in D&D.
Something really trivial.
I think, if I remember correctly. I don't know.
I don't know. So something really trivial. Like,
I haven't DM'd in a hot minute.
Doing towards your neighbours or something, right? All these sorts of ways in which your neighbours could make your lives miserable, a liberal would say, well, there's no fault here, because there's no law against this. And everyone agrees, actually, and this is one of the key problems with the categorical imperative. If every rational creature could assent to just work for yourself and screw everyone else, well, yeah, everyone could assent to that, actually. Everyone could say, yeah, it's totally rational. If we all do this, then we'll all get whatever we want and sod the other guy.
Yep.
And so you end up in a highly unpleasant world. And the liberal can only say, well, I mean, as long as they're following the rules. And that's not sufficient. That's just not sufficient. To have
Facts.
it's that, and that's not even considering the changing of the rules to be highly liberal, as in you can impose the sort of woke morality code on a workplace or whatever. So you've got to use your pronouns, you've got to make sure you've got the kind of racial hierarchy in your minds and gender hierarchy in your minds and all this sort of stuff. Trans women and all.
We're all made in the image of God. That's where it begins and ends.
The codes were just actually quite neutral. Even then, you could have all sorts of trouble. But then, what happens if you have these kind of uneven codes that woke morality brings? Well, you've got people maliciously applying the rules in order to hurt some people for the benefit of others. And I'm sorry, I just don't want to live in the kind of social contract society that can facilitate that. I don't think the rules are actually sacred. I think what's sacred are the bonds.
The rules themselves aren't what's sacred. He's right. The 10 Commandments. This is actually so interesting that he's saying this, because this is what the Jews got wrong a lot of the time before Christ. This is what Christ was pointing out to the Pharisees. The rules, the sacraments, the circumcision, this is what some modern Christians get wrong today at times. The Ark of the Covenant, Solomon's Temple, the circumcision, all of those different aspects in traditional Judaism aren't what is sacred. What is sacred is why they are done. They are done for God, and they are done to separate you. They were done originally to separate that people from the rest of the world and to display God as He is. And then when Christ fulfilled all of that, that then allowed for a unity with us back to God, and an alignment back to us with God. And now we do everything directly for God, and we don't even always need all of those things. Is baptism something that you should absolutely have as a Christian? Absolutely. But the baptism itself isn't what is truly important. The baptism itself isn't truly what's actually saving. It is that devotion in the baptism, towards Christ, that truly saves the person. Now, that also doesn't mean that, like, it works a little differently with children, I think, and that's another whole nother thing. But as I've been reading my Bible, especially Paul's letters and also the Gospels and things like that, I've really been able to start consolidating my position on these things. It's not finished. I still have a long way before it's finished, but I've started consolidating it. And the conclusion I've definitely reached is that these rituals and these things, what is important is the why they are done, the representation behind them, not the act itself per se, always. The act itself is vital and important because of the fact that that is the way in which to display this. But it is not an affoulement, I guess is the best way to think about it. And he's right. I know that was kind of a little side tangent, but I was kind of trying to point out how, yeah, the problem with liberalism literally is that, again, it just pads everything down to a surface level, and it's not looking at the why, the what for is this being done. It has no answer to it.
It's between people. As in, I like the people around me. I think that Aristotle was right. A civic polity, any kind of civilization, is fundamentally built on friendship. And friendship means not acting against the interests of that person, and that person will not act against your interests. And so together, you can actually work and cooperate and make a
I think the better term for it is love, um, Christian biblical love.
Better world. Regardless of what the rules are, you do it because you want to help them. And I mean, you might bend the rules slightly to help that person. Like, for example, in Britain, it used to be normal for like 14-year-olds to go to the pub and they'd get a beer or two, and everyone knew they shouldn't be there, but they'd have a couple of beers. And if they wouldn't cause any trouble, because they knew they weren't supposed to be there, the rules definitely prohibited them being there, drinking. And yet, the village would tolerate it because it would sort of teach them how to act properly in this environment, how to act in this social
that's
setting.
intelligent.
And so it would just be normal. It'd be normal for, like, teenagers to go and get beers in the pub, as long as they didn't have too many beers, as long as they didn't cause any trouble, and to learn their place in the world, in this moral hierarchy. And that used to be completely normal, but a hard application of the rules would completely destroy what was otherwise a very wholesome and healthy social mechanism to incorporate young people into the tribe. But anyway, getting back to this, there's no excess of liberalism with me. I am in opposition to liberalism. So of course my anger was not against the liberal order was not misplaced. But the complaint that my anger hardened into rage against the order itself, well, yes, because Islamist intolerance and woke leftism and all this sort of stuff, it's not that my indignation lost its shape, it's that I became cognizant of why these things were happening.
Yes.
Why are there millions of Muslims in my country? Why are there millions of Muslims in your country? Because the liberal order cannot determine between these two groups of people. It can't make moral judgments against them. If they're just following the rules, then this is all completely fine. Then them having mosques and like blaring the call to prayer and all this sort of stuff, and proselytizing on the street.
It's treating the rules and
in a non-liberal order, in an order that
physical as the sacred and not the reason behind it.
You can see why this is unacceptable, and that's why all across the Middle East, these communities
it's treating at the depths and not at. Sorry, it's treating at the surface, not at the depths.
Broken any of the rules. I know. I just didn't want this because it changes the character of my country and the place in which I live. It changes the character. The thing that I found appealing and was attached to in my own country is changed on purpose by the liberal order that is blind to the notion that it should care about the character of the country that it rules over. And so we lose, by degrees, legally,
it's a slow decay
to colonization that is done by the liberal order.
It's a slow decay
from under our feet, and everyone, it's white flight. It's like, well, sorry, why can't we live in places that we are familiar with people we find predictable? And the Islamist intolerance, I mean, the problem is that the liberal order is remarkably tolerant of the Islamist intolerance, isn't it? And so the people involved will have a suite of liberal ideas in their head that tells them, I need to cover up the rape gangs. I need to cover up the rape gangs. Now, from a relational perspective, obviously one community being predatory to another, the most vulnerable in this other, is a real problem. It's shocking.
Sorry, I got a notification on my computer.
And that community would be forced to leave. If your community is being predatory to ours, something has to be done. But in liberalism, it is we're going to take those couple of people and we're going to put them in jail for 5 years and then we're going to let them out again. Sorry, do you think that solved anything? Do you think that do you think that has restored the moral integrity of our civilization?
It can't.
Or do you think that is just essentially a way of making sure that justice isn't done? And I hate to tell you this, but I think it's actually a way of making sure that justice isn't done.
Yeah.
It's just enough to make sure that there aren't riots. That's what it's doing. And so it's hard to see how
and it'll lead to a slow decay, a slow collapse,
and
a
that's
slow
just one
bleeding
I mean, there are various
of your culture's existence, of everything about it.
There's no point going into it. Obviously, we've litigated it so many times on the podcast now.
That's true.
This is the plan.
They really have. I've watched
because
them a
liberalism
lot.
Doesn't see groups of people, and it doesn't care about cultural particularity. Liberalism interpolates each person as being an atomic individual who exists prior to society. And so by stripping away the cultural particulars of each person and putting them down to their essence, what is a man? Well, he's a rational animal. He must eat, he must sleep, he must have a family, maybe. In fact, that's not even guaranteed in the liberal order, to be honest.
That's definitely not guaranteed in the liberal order.
He must have shelter. Well, and possibly occupation. Okay, well, that's the essence of a human being. That's what the
not the essence
universal
of a
man
human being,
is.
because it's just
And
looking at
therefore,
the
everything
surface, the
beyond
physical.
that is contingent. Everything beyond that is choice. And
There's
that
no
means I can
that's a
choose to abandon
denial
all
of
that. I can choose
metaphysics
to
that we
integrate
know
into other cultures
exists.
if I so want, which is not how any of it works. Because actually, there is no universal man. There is no pre-social man. There is no man born before society.
Agreed.
He exists before society and makes the rational decision to sign a social contract and enter into society. There's just no such thing. In fact, in reality, every person is born into a web of relations, which are a series of obligations and entitlements that they have, whether they like it or not.
Yep.
You will always be your father's son.
There's a reason. There's a reason why part of the Ten Commandments is love thy father, love thy mother, and respect them. There's a reason for that, people. It's not just to do it to do it. The rule isn't what's sacred there. There's the reason behind it that is sacred, that is important.
You will always be your mother's son or daughter. You will always have uncles and aunties and neighbours and friends and a community around you. You'll always be a part of something that exists somewhere, whether you like it or not. And
even your absence still causes relations. And that's something else also important to think about. Even your absence, your removal, is important to think about. Your absence will cause an impact on relations between other people and yourself.
The only way to not do that is to literally ostracize yourself and become a hermit. And even then, the relations you have with your family,
he brings it up.
choose and you've got no getting away from, like in the country you're born into, the tribe to which you belong. Even if you segregate yourself away from it, you still have these relations.
Yep.
You can't choose any.
Yep.
And so liberalism was just wrong in the anthropology of what it is to be a human being. But because it believes in its own wrongness, it says, well, I mean, basically, if we're all universal men, then literally any person
it thinks
is
they're
the
all
same
blank
as any
slates,
other
and that's
person.
just simply
Because
not
I
true.
don't care about the cultural particularity.
This is why, again, it's so important. Again, I think I will be really talking in depth on the image of God and what that is in those things. Because, you know what? I'll go into it just a little bit here. So, an image is merely... Logically, an image is not the true reflection of something. It is not truly that thing itself. It is merely... It is merely a capturing of something. It catches a glimpse. It captures a temporary reflection of something. Nothing in an image is 100% true to what that being actually is when it was captured. An image never truly captures the essence of something. Okay? And that's important to think about as a Christian. Because the image of God means is that we were all made in God's image. We are all that tiny glimpse, capture, and refraction of God. And that capturing is what makes us all valuable. Because that capturing, this is how vast and great and mighty God is think about how broad that capturing is. How many different images there are. that are captured in that glimpse of God. That's what gives a human being value. It is not just because you're a human being. It is because you were built in the image of something so great, so vast, so mighty, that it displays itself so vast and so mightily. That's why we're all worthy of being treated with respect, being treated equally, being treated well, taking care of each other, and all of those things, and thus working towards good and living out good, because that's also part of what we should do to be a reflection of God in that aspect. So that way we can be closer to Him and actually understand good and therefore understand God. Because we as human beings, as only an image, can only capture such a minute glimpse of that. But we should recognize that when we capture that minute glimpse, we need to hold on to it and follow it with everything we have. Because good is the true thing to follow, is the true thing worth running towards, worth dreaming about, worth being and having. That's why I said in my first video, I want to be a good man. That's why I said what I said. Yeah.
And therefore I'm really blind to it. So I can just bring in millions of people from there, millions of people from there, millions of people from there, tell them what the rules are, and say moral people follow these rules. Whereas of course these different groups actually don't agree. They much more closely agree with me on that morality is affirmative. Morality means you have to do something, not do something. And
morality does require action.
These people, the people around me, have got weird and horrible morality. They do things I don't agree with. They don't do that in my country. Why do they do it here? Why are they allowed to do this? And so you get conflict. You get cultural areas of friction between these. And in fact, in this country, these cultures tend to self-segregate away from not only the majority natives, but each other. And it's one of those things where the liberal is just so blind to all of this, and it's an obvious part of reality. It's physically happened now, and it's perfectly theoretically explainable, as I have just done. And so it's just like, well, I can't believe you've got a righteous order against the liberal order itself. Well, the liberal order made this possible and did this to us, and is currently, little by little, stealing our country away from us, because it doesn't recognize the legitimacy of countries fundamentally, because it only recognizes the legitimacy of the ultimately liberated individual. It only recognizes that, and everything liberalism is trying to achieve is to generate the pre-social man. I mean, the very point of liberalism is to restore to man the theoretical rights he had when he was in what they call the state of nature, when he was in before society. And that means ultimate freedom and ultimate equality. Well, I'm sorry, but you don't have that.
You can't have that. That you can't have that in a society. Societies require sacrifice. Like that's just illogical.
I live in a society, and trying to deform society, imposing the social contract harder and harder and harder on our society in order to splinter our relations with ourselves, our neighbours, and our place of
splinter ourselves from God.
Corrupt the territory which our tribe occupies is damaging. It's doing serious damage to society.
Irreparably crushing.
Genuinely said the point of this project is to make people minimally dependent on one another and maximally dependent on the state. Because they want the state to take the place of the state of nature. They want the state to be the thing that provides everything, to give you maximal freedom that they conceived the individual had before he joined society. He just walked around plucking food off the trees and sleeping under the boughs of oaks in a literal sort of Garden of Eden fantasy land, which never happened. That was just not true. None of that was true.
I mean, that's not even true when you read Genesis. We were designed to work and actually to enjoy work. If you read the fall, we were cursed to despise work but still must do it. Yeah, like he's absolutely right. It's a false principle dichotomy and understanding of the Garden of Eden. I really like that attribution. Obviously, we disagree on that aspect because Carl's only going to church; he doesn't actually believe. Which I'll keep praying over him and keep praying for him that he will convert, he will get baptized, and he will come to Christ. It can be a long battle for the soul. It can be a long battle for the soul. And all you can do as a fellow Christian is just pray for them. It's the only real thing we can do because God can only change the heart.
And yet liberalism, because it wants to harmonise liberty and equality in society where they can't exist as perfect equals, it does everything it can to try and impose that state of affairs. And so you've got oppression, so you have atomization, so you have the kind of lack of recognition of legitimate claims by groups over areas to honour dignity. You don't have these things, but these really do exist in the world. They really do exist between groups. People recognise it, people feel it. The thymotic side of a person is instinctively tapped into this. And so this is my problem with liberalism. Like I said, I'll probably write a book about this, so I can go into detail and explain with all the citations needed.
I would love to read his book.
Because it's all there. It's all in liberalism. It's all in the liberal theory. And I don't even blame them in their own time for thinking these things, because, of course, it's not to say that a relational world can't also be oppressive. It can. It obviously can. But it's not immediately obvious and necessarily true that the exact opposite of that, which is to have no relation.
Well, that's why I've said, and I've defined God in the way that I have, where God is all good, and merely the absence of God is evil. And truly, like, if you disagree with that, I ask you to just sit down and really think that through. Read your Bible, read the Word, read everything, and really dwell on that question. Really think about, ponder, question, like, examine that question.
Relations whatsoever.
What does that mean that God is all good?
Consensual relations, anyway. It's not evident that that's good either, actually. The family, your unchosen moral situation, is a moral good. This is a good thing. And yet, we're in a position where the government can literally just take your children away from you if it decrees. Like in America and in Canada, you've had examples where fathers have been denied access to their children because they didn't want the state or their mothers to chop their genitals off. And so the fathers get the children taken away from them, and they themselves get criminalized. And I'm sorry.
It's absurd. It's insane.
Might well be
it's
the social
madness.
Contract society where everything is done by the expressly good will that gets to choose and self-author its own future and its own person and future.
The only thing it's going to self-author is self-author its own destruction. That's the only thing it's going to work towards.
I don't agree with that, and I don't think that's moral at all. I actually think, like I said, that's veering into evil. So when we get to the part
it is
he
evil.
Quotes me and says the problem with the woke left wasn't the woke part.
It is evil because fundamentally it rejects God and says I can do it on my own. So by nature it's actually satanic, and it's actually self-idolization in the most extreme, horrid sense. And yeah, that's terrible. That's the ultimate form of pride. That's the pride that consumed the devil and turned him against God, and made him the most rebelling figure in all of existence.
Was the left part, and I just want to say I utterly stand by that. He doesn't understand why the woke part is merely a tool. It's a conceptual lens.
Yep.
The problem is with the left part, because the left part is trying to get us to the most radical form of liberalism that can exist, where we are not dependent on one another, we are maximally dependent on the state. And that's what the point of the woke...
It builds towards socialism, and socialism is bad, people. Just gonna say it. It's an antithesis. It's an antithesis. It is an antithesis of God. When you really understand it, it's antithesis to God.
To facilitate the left part.
And therefore, as a Christian,
so you can say, well,
you
the woke
cannot
part
be
keeps
for it.
pointing out like systems of oppression and structures of power. So okay, I mean that's what liberalism itself originally was and always has been. Liberalism is the original woke movement.
Yep.
The problem, though, I mean, you could see all of these structures of power, like the structure of power between parents and children, right? You can easily give a woke analysis of the structures of power between parents and children, and how parents have absolute power over their children.
Yep.
And
they should.
The children and them.
They should, because that parent, if they live in a godly manner, they will direct and guide that child to also be morally good and guided. A lack of that will lead to a chaotic, horrible society.
Human rights, they need to be liberated from their parents. No, that's the left part speaking. You can look from a traditionalist perspective and say, yeah, there are structures of power between parents and children, which are necessary and good for the children.
Yes.
I love my kids, and so...
Order and authority is actually a good thing. Structure is a good thing to have, especially for children.
I use my power to make sure they don't hurt themselves, to make sure they learn to be good people, to craft and mold them
Agreed.
into decent human beings. Liberalism assumes that just happens by magic. Like, it's just a coincidence that people grow into virtuous people.
That's
and when
absurd.
they don't, liberalism can only say, well, I guess society made them bad. But it's not just society making them bad. What it is they were not properly habituated into a virtuous life. And so this whole like woke left stuff, well, it's just the left. This is all it is. Just like anyone anywhere can give an analysis of power dynamics, and the woke part is just choosing the vectors that you are going to analyze. You can choose whatever vectors you want. You're just as woke as anyone else all of a sudden. It doesn't mean that you want to destroy the relationships that bind civilization together. If anything, you could look at it from a woke traditionalist perspective and say, right, okay, these are the things that bind us. We might want to tighten those a little. We might want to make sure, we want to shore those relationships up, which is why I keep saying,
our
bring
strength
your mum.
and
Bring
foundations
your mum.
together.
She wants to hear from you. This will strengthen the relationship you have with your mum. Bring your sisters, bring your brothers. Just hang out with your...
This is why I have been so, vehement and constant in my direction, especially with my family. I've been... Every week, I make sure that before whatever I gotta do, I get in contact with my family, and I go down and I say, hey, guys, we're getting together this week, right? Or what time this week can we get together? Even though it's only for an hour. We only get to see each other for an hour every week. Because I live in a completely different state. My sister lives in a completely different state. But we only get to see each other for an hour. But we sit down and we talk and we do things, and then we have a Bible study. Do that. Keep and build and hold on to the foundations of your relationships. Foundation structure is a good thing to have in life.
Friends, strengthen the relationships between you. That's what a woke traditionalist is. It's someone who's like, oh yeah, no, good point. These relationships.
Facts. And if you've actually taken a good read at Lord of the Rings, you would realize that it's not a lot of walking. There's so much character development being done in that walking because of all the conversations being had in that walking. Is these bonds being built?
Tips are important. But I don't want to liberate humanity.
It's such a good book.
I want
it
to
feels
make sure
so
that
human.
have moral character in their unchosen bonds, not some sort of weird degeneracy. And so, actually, we need to do the right thing to improve these bonds. It's the left part there that is the problem. Anyway, he carries on about my English identity. And the thing is, this is important. I don't know whether you've noticed, but identity is an incredibly salient category these days, and so it's worth properly understanding, because liberalism does want to take away our collective identity.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't recognize it doesn't value
It wants to strip. It wants to strip man of everything besides his pure physical value, and that is a flawed way to build things.
The ones that it does, the minority ones, you'll notice in all times and all places, it's always the minority ones that it recognizes and not the majority ones. Well, there's a reason for that, because it perceives that the majority, having power over the minority, always oppresses them in all times and all places, doesn't allow them to freely express themselves, considers the normal interactions between the majority and the minority to be intrinsically oppressive, and therefore it has to. This is the state,
which is just a misunderstanding,
to protect these minorities from the social interactions that they have with the majority, the natural social interactions, so they don't have to change. Now you might be like, well, why should they change? Well, that's what integration is. That's what relations between communities is. One community changing, and that's not to say the majority community doesn't change either, but it's obvious which one changes more.
True.
And so this question of identity is important because in it are a series of claims. For example, the English have the claim to England in the same way that the Palestinians have the claim
just
to Palestine.
Just as Americans have a claim to America.
India. This is a thing that the left had recognized in previous eras. It's the root of decolonization that an ethnic group has a primary claim to a certain piece of land. And I'm sorry, but the English do have the primary claim to England. They are a group, we can measure it objectively, we feel it in our hearts, we identify as this thing. And so you complaining that the flag only belongs to those of English blood and therefore Jews can never truly be English is like a cat complaining it can't be a dog. Like, you don't understand. You are defining Jews as people from Judea. They are the people of Judea who sent into exile by the Romans and have spent 2,000 years in exile and now have finally got their own nation state again. Which, don't get me wrong, I support them having a nation state. That's not to say I support what Israel does, but I support them having a nation.
He basically holds the same position that I do on Israel, which is that I believe they have a right to exist. It's where my position stands. They have a right to exist. I don't believe they're fulfilling all these prophecies or any of that stuff. I believe, as a nation, they have a right to exist because fundamentally I believe all nations are established and their borders are made by God. You can read about that in Paul's letters.
The state. I think everyone should have a nation state, frankly. I think the Kurds should have a nation state. But that doesn't mean that Jews, outside of their context, as people from Judea, are English. Otherwise, why do you even call them Jews? Why don't you just call them English? No, instead you define them as people from another place. And then you say, well, he's saying these people from another place aren't these people over here. Yeah, that's true. That's not a judgment against Jews. That's not a judgment against anyone. That's not saying they're bad. That's not even saying they can't live here. I'm not saying anything of the sort. All I'm saying is they are not the same as the English, which is why you have defined them as something other than the English.
Agreed.
And so, yeah, the England flag, the flag of the country to whom the English gave their name, belongs to the English. And I'm not saying that Jews can't wave the St. George's Cross. It's actually a great thing to say, no, we want to show our moral support as non-English people for the English because we live in England. That's great. I mean, I've always said this, if I were going to live anywhere else, I'd probably live in Greece. I'm a big Hellenophile. And my God, I'd be the most hardcore Greek nationalist you would have ever seen. I'd be waving the Greek flag all the time. I'd be angry at Greek leftists for tearing down the Greek flags. I'd be like, how dare you do this? What are you thinking? This is your country, and you're just going to have to suck it up. You're not atomic nowhere people.
Agreed.
You're just fungible, interchangeable, liberal nonsense. I would be a damn hardcore Greek nationalist. So why should Jews in England not be the same here? Why would Jews in England not want English people to be in charge of England? Why are they even living here if they didn't expect that or want that? So no, I'm sorry, Jewish people and English people are two different ethnic groups. There's nothing wrong with that. This is not a moral judgment, and I don't take this back. That's normal. It's just normal to know this, to understand that peoples belong to groups. Anyway,
True.
we get to the final bit here. So my fall being a tragedy. Now, and the loss of a steward who once held the line against extremism, only to join the ranks of those he opposed. Look, I have not joined the ranks of the Islamists, or the Muslims more broadly, or the radical liberals who we could call communists or woke left or whatever you want to call them. Like, I've not joined their ranks. I've just not stayed in your.
I think he's actually accusing you here of joining the alt-right and the right extremists, like white nationalist kind of chicanery.
Ranks, because ultimately, you and them agree on the same thing. You and them basically have the same principles fundamentally. The question is just what point in the development of these principles are you prepared to stop? Well, you're prepared to stop where it's comfortable for you.
Nah.
But they're not comfortable with it. They want to go
Yep.
further, and they make arguments from the presuppositions that you hold as a liberal. And so they'll just drag you. This is why woke has took over our civilization, and it's only now you've got quite a reactionary response to it.
It usually takes time for humanity to go,
the
oh
centre
God,
right
we're
classical
sorry.
liberals that made that happen.
We made a
It was
boo-boo.
people who are not liberals saying we're not taking this anymore. We're not happy with it. But this conceit that liberalism, in its deontological, non-agentive form of morality, is somehow superior to traditional morality is not right. It is
Agreed.
obviously deeply inferior.
It
which is why
falls
the
flat,
countries we
ironically.
live in seem to be so permissive to criminals constantly. A man should be judged by his actions. His morality, whether he is a moral person or not, is informed by the things that he does to other people.
ADD a moment.
Why do we use the what would the term be? I think idiom does apply here. The idiom falls flat when typically flat is a good thing in construction. Anybody know the source behind this? I'd really love to know. Post it down in the comments.
And if someone does something horrific, then we should be taking, and in fact it is incumbent on the society to take equivalent moral action to write the balance sheet, the cosmic moral balance sheet, to permit the prospering of terrible people. And that so many of the criminals, especially in America, when they've done something truly awful, you realise, oh my God, they've been in trouble with the law. They've got a huge rap sheet of all these things they've done wrong, and yet permissive judge, let them out. And eventually they do something absolutely abominable. The sort of thing you just think, how did that ever happen? That should never have happened. And yet it happens all the time now. All the time. The poor woman getting
Because they
stabbed
look
on
at the
train
surface
other day
level.
was not
And that's a problem.
anything actually that unusual, but it was so horrific and graphic and unnecessary
Ugh.
that
I don't-
only the
I don't
liberal
even
order
know.
could bring that about. That's just not the way things used to be in America.
Well, if you think about it, it's because they're trying to bring it back to this base, naturalized man that has all freedom and no responsibilities. Because they have this misconception on how the garden was and how the garden worked. It's foolishness, utter garbage.
The more liberal America has become, the more this stuff happens. And so no, I don't consider this to be a fall. If anything, I actually consider liberal morality to be an evil spell that's been cast over you. That you think you're being good, whilst doing so many bad things, whilst facilitating so much evil, whilst going along with wrong and calling it right.
Agreed.
I'm just not in favour of it. I feel like I genuinely, there's a kind of like waking up from the Matrix feeling of it, where you realise you've got
I
a surge
bet.
of it all over you, and you say, oh God, you cough out all the slime, and you realise, God, I'm actually really weak. My moral muscles have not been properly exercised, and I was living in a delusion
True.
about what right and wrong actually are, and suddenly you're blinking because you've never used your actual moral eyes before, and you realise, I need to call my mum. You need to actually start shoring up your relationships. You need to start thinking about how you treat the people around you and why that matters more. It is literally the only thing that really matters in your bloody life, mate. And so this whole thing, you find yourself pulling stuff out of the sludge going, oh God, what was I doing all this time?
True.
And honestly, that's why I apologise to Jess Phillips. So I was just like, yeah, I just shouldn't have done that. Because she wasn't even arguing on liberal grounds. She was arguing on relational grounds. And as much
I
as
don't
I
know
dislike Jess
that
Phillips,
whole one. I don't remember
she's
Jess
not wrong on
Phillips.
that.
I
Was
don't
the
remember
thing.
how many years ago
That's
that
why
was.
I apologise. I apologise for me to make sure that I was truly shedding this stuff. And so to just act like, oh well, cultural inheritance is mistaken for ethnic possession. That's all it is. A culture is the product of a people, and
Yep.
a people is
Agreed.
the ethnos. The cultures
Agreed.
don't just come down from the heavens and find themselves fully formed, that anyone can just be like, oh right, okay, I'm just gonna...
You read about the forming of Judaism in the Bible. That's evidence right there. You read about that in any mythological origin story shows like the birth and development of civilization to one degree or another. So yes, that's absurd, and I fully agree with them.
No, like today, it's like putting on a shirt. I'm just going to put on a new shirt, and I don't like this one now. I'm going to get changed into a different shirt. That's just not how it works. Like, everyone knows when an American is present,
Again, it's
regardless
surface
of what race
level.
they are, because they're obviously American. Because you can't help the cultural inheritance you have. Like wherever I go, everyone knows
Facts,
I'm
agreed.
English because you can't help the cultural inheritance that you have.
Agreed.
This is not about allegiance,
And it's
because
not
your
a
allegiance
bad
can
thing.
change. Unfortunately, these things are baked into you because you were born into a civilization. It molds you in so many ways, so many myriad ways, small, tiny cultural attitudes, the character of the way that you're raised, that you can't just shed these things. You can't get rid of them. It's your accent, it's your behavior, it's the things you expect, it's the things...
I think over time you can. It's just really, 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 really hard to do so. It's not easy. It is not easy to break at the foundations of yourself, figure out what is at the core, and rebuild something properly. That is not easy.
You don't expect. It's the way that you deal with different kinds of problems or encounters. All of these things are part of you.
All of those are shaped
And
by
you
your
can't
relationships.
just get rid of them. These are an ethnic possession. It's just the nature of the thing, and you can pretend that they're not, and that anyone can just integrate into any society. But what is actually happening there is actually a relationship is being formed outside of liberalism, because groups of people have always lived with other groups of people, like in some proximity to them, whatever, and understandings exist between them. This is what banter is in Europe.
Yep.
There's such great banter between the ethnic groups of the Europeans. Obviously, the English, the Irish, the French, the Scottish, the Germans, blah, 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 blah. Everyone's got a stereotype for the other, because that makes the other people...
That's probably true. We have the same thing here in America, where you have like Midwesterners, you have Chicagoans, you have New Yorkers, you have Californians, you have Texans, you have... Like, we do the same stereotyping, bantering here in America.
That means you understand them to some degree. And so you can say, okay, right, I've got...
Agreed.
We've both got a shared expectation. I know that a Frenchman has expectations of an Englishman, has a conception of an Englishman. And in a lot of ways,
Yep.
these are worth living up to, actually. And
Some
at
of them
least
are,
it
yeah.
means that we don't have to be on our guard. At least they know what they're going to get from me, and I know what I'm going to get from them. And it's often going to be annoying. Teasing. But when you bring people who we don't have this kind of cultural relationship
English.
with, well, it makes the world a lot darker and colder and stranger.
Absent.
And
Empty.
actually, you can say, well, they've got
A foul.
British citizenship, bro. Look, they've got a passport. But if we don't even share a language, if our peoples have never had interaction, or at least none significant that's ever made a cultural impact, like, what difference does allegiance?
Islam has to your countries.
Just not a good one.
Kids make.
Well, actually,
Sorry,
kind
but
of a good one,
theoretically-
actually, now that I think about it.
We're
Just
supposed to have the same allegiance with
the interaction was
Like, what are
graphic,
you talking about?
but led to good results for you.
theoretically, they're
Not
British
great results
citizens,
for them.
and they pay taxes and swear fealty to the crown or whatever. And you think that I'm supposed to be in allegiance with these people? That's crazy. Your allegiance is connected to your ancestry because your ancestry is the group into which you were born. But of course, as we've covered, the liberal hates the idea that you have an unchosen obligation, and so does everything to try and hide it. Anyway, that's why I don't feel like I've fallen from liberalism. What I feel is that actually a magic spell has been dispelled across me. I've come out of the matrix, covered in the slime. And
Yeah,
I've done everything
you're making the steps
get
out
it
of it. I'll
off.
give you that much, Carl.
I'm
You're definitely
tired
making the steps
of
out of it,
lies of liberalism. Because
Mr. Benjamin.
it is lies. Right? All of the false anthropology, none of it is true. None of it is true. It is not true that freedom and equality can be equals. It is not true that it is good to have ultimate freedom or ultimate equality. It is not true that man existed prior to society. It is not true that man exists outside of his groups and social context. It is not true that
Agreed.
morality consists in rules. And so many other things about liberalism that are not true. It is not true that man is a purely rational animal. Like, this is all predicated on the
That's
rational
not true
idea
at
of the
all.
social contract. It's not true. None of it is true. And that's why I have left liberalism. It's not true.
I really agree with a lot of what Carl said in this video. Obviously, I have a little bit of a different perspective and view. Overall, I hope you enjoyed his video. I hope you enjoyed my video. And with that aside, I'll be leaving a link in the description for this. Give him a like and subscribe. Give me a like and subscribe. Comment down below. I'll catch you all later, and God bless.